Well, Harris, you have emphasized in your work the notion that it's not just the avoidance of disease, it's not just the avoidance of decline. It is actually, brain health can be important to capital formation, to a world in which new technologies and where brain agility is needed in order for economies to thrive. So, talk a bit about your work and your thinking here.
Sure, absolutely. So as I went through my training in psychiatry, neurology, and neuroscience, I noticed that there was a lot of discussion about deficits. How depressed are you? How cognitively impaired are you? And that's important. We need to factor those things in. But we need to think about positive aspects of the brain as well to give a more optimistic framing of things and perhaps less stigma. So brain health brings in not just the deficits, but also the strengths, resilience, creativity, adaptability. Frankly, a strength right now is your ability to co-pilot with generative AI. So if we start to bring in these traditional sort of mental health and neurology aspects with the positive aspects as well, I think we can shed some of the old stigma and baggage of the fields of psychiatry and neurology. And I think we can also, when we start to talk about these skill aspects of creativity, resilience, green skills, etc., we're also able to get much more attention from the private sector and from governments for their employees, because we want essentially to not just reduce the deficit, the cost of these disorders on society. We want to talk about how do we grow productivity? How do we get more entrepreneurship in societies, more economic dynamism and economic security? So what this is called is brain capital, which means brain health plus brain skills. And basically what I do now is I go around and work in economic policy and policy entrepreneurship to say to heads of state and business leaders, brain capital is a vital asset. Brain capital is as important as GDP, it's as important as road and bridge infrastructure, and brain capital, if you invest in it, will drive your economic security and also drive potentially your national security as well, which we can talk about another time.
Well, I'm curious about how one does that and where one does that, because there are a lot of employers in the world, and as you mentioned, government is a big employer.
Yes.
Exactly what should employers be doing and thinking about and measuring the capital they have within their own organizations and how to improve that capital, the brain capital of their employees?
Yeah, well, I would say that a wonderful example is actually an initiative that you're involved in, George. You and I together, you have a senior position, the Brain Health Business Collaborative. We need to engage in sort of recognize that there's been a lot of mental health in the workforce projects before, and they're great, like One Mind at Work. But when we're talking about brain health in the workplace, this project that Kelly O'Brien is leading with Us Against Alzheimer's and the Milken Institute and Brain Health Business Collaborative is exactly on the money here. We need to engage big private companies like Shell is engaged in this, as well as government employers as well. And we need to give them ideas and facts and knowledge. But then, one of the things that's interesting, right, is a brain health score of your company. So could we assess the brain health of employees and then start to order private companies' brain health scores collective of their employees against each other? This could also help to drive dementia prevention, and finger could be an example of something that drives up the brain health score of a company. So, and then the logical progression would be, imagine if you could get an exchange traded fund where you have the shares of these big private companies, and you essentially choose the 100 highest brain health scored companies in the world and put them into an ETF to celebrate those companies and have those companies, an ETF, a brain health ETF, traded on the exchange, and people can invest in that, whether they're Mr. and Mrs. Jones consumer investors, or whether they're potentially big investors like pension funds and sovereign wealth funds could start to invest in and force company positive behavior to invest in the brain health of their employees. So anyway, this is a very exciting opportunity, I think.
Harris, your mind is large and growing. I tell you, you're resilient, a brain resilient.
Well, I take after you, George. You're a good role model.